Picture this. The strongest man who ever lived, the guy who played the Terminator, the man who became governor of California, is now 78 years old. And what's happening to him right now will break your heart and inspire you at the same time. This isn't the story you think you know about Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is about what happens when even the toughest person on earth has to face the one enemy no one can beat: time itself. You see, Arnold isn't just getting older. He's fighting battles that would crush most people. His heart has been cut open 4 different times. He's watched the people he loves most slowly forget who he is. He's made mistakes that tore his family apart. And now, at 78, he's facing something scarier than any movie villain he ever fought: the quiet reality that even legends have to say goodbye someday. But here's what will surprise you. This isn't a sad ending to Arnold's story. It's actually the most beautiful chapter he's ever written. And by the time I'm done telling you what's really happening to Arnold Schwarzenegger right now, you're going to see strength in a completely different way. Let me take you back to where it all started, because you can't understand what's happened to Arnold today without knowing where he came from. Arnold wasn't born rich or famous. He wasn't even born in America. He grew up in a tiny village in Austria called Thal, where hardly anyone had heard of bodybuilding or Hollywood dreams. His house didn't even have heat in the winter. Can you imagine trying to stay warm when it's freezing cold outside and there's no heater in your house? Arnold's dad was a police officer who was very strict and rarely showed love. His older brother got all the attention, and Arnold felt invisible in his own home. He once said that in his house, love wasn't something you just got. You had to earn it. And even then, you might not get it at all. So what did Arnold do? He decided that if no one was going to notice him, he was going to make himself impossible to ignore. The problem was, there was no gym in his tiny village. So Arnold went down to his basement, which was cold and dark and smelled musty. He found old pieces of metal and wood and made his own weights. Every night, while other kids were playing or watching TV, Arnold was down in that basement, lifting heavy things and dreaming of a life bigger than anyone his village could imagine. He put pictures of strong men on his bedroom walls and studied them like they were his heroes. And in a way, they were. Because to Arnold, those muscular men weren't just strong. They were free. Free from being small. Free from being ignored. Free from living a life that felt too tight to fit in. When Arnold was a teenager, he found a real gym about an hour away from his house. So every day, he would ride his bicycle for hours just to work out there. It didn't matter if it was raining or snowing or if the wind was blowing hard against him. He would pedal that bike because every turn of the wheels was taking him closer to the life he wanted and further away from the life he didn't want. His friends thought he was crazy. Maybe he was. But Arnold wasn't just exercising. He was building his escape route, one muscle at a time. He knew that village couldn't hold the dreams that were growing inside him. So he made himself strong enough to break free. When Arnold was 21, he did something that scared everyone who knew him. He bought a plane ticket to America with almost no money in his pocket and barely able to speak English. Can you imagine moving to a completely different country where you don't know anyone and can barely talk to people? That's exactly what Arnold did. When he got off that plane in Los Angeles, America wasn't the magical place he had imagined. It was hard and lonely and confusing. People smiled politely when he tried to talk, but most of the time they couldn't understand his thick Austrian accent. Simple conversations became exhausting battles with words that wouldn't come out right. So Arnold did what he always did. He worked harder than everyone else. During the day, he carried heavy bricks and swung hammers on construction sites under the hot California sun. His muscles burned and his back ached, but he saved every dollar he earned. At night, he went to small, cramped gyms that smelled like sweat and iron, and he trained his body like his life depended on it. He lived in tiny shared rooms with just a bed and a lamp. Some nights, he would lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Los Angeles traffic, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He was thousands of miles away from his family, from everything familiar, from anyone who cared about him. But Arnold had something that kept him going. He could see his future, even when his present looked impossible. He said later that he saw himself where he wanted to be, not where he was. And that vision was stronger than loneliness, stronger than doubt, stronger than the pain in his muscles after 12-hour workdays. In 1970, when Arnold was just 23 years old, something amazing happened. He won the Mr. Olympia competition, becoming the youngest person ever to win the most important bodybuilding contest in the world. But instead of getting easier, life got harder. Now everyone was watching him, waiting for him to fail. Every competition felt like he was fighting not just for a trophy, but for his right to stay in America, for his dream to keep living. The pressure was crushing. If he lost, it wasn't just losing a contest. It was losing everything he had worked for. And the loneliness got worse, not better. Success made him famous, but it didn't make him feel less alone. The bigger his muscles got, the bigger the spotlight became, and the heavier the weight on his shoulders felt. But Arnold kept winning. 7 Mr. Olympia titles. 7 times standing at the top of the bodybuilding world. Each victory was built on pain that no one could see. Torn muscles, aching joints, injuries that he hid from everyone because showing weakness might mean losing everything. Then Hollywood came calling. Movie studios wanted this huge, muscular man with a funny accent to be in their films. But they also laughed at that same accent and said his name was too long and too foreign for movie posters. Rejection became as familiar as his daily workouts. But Arnold refused to give up. He studied acting like he had studied bodybuilding. He worked on his English like he worked on his muscles. And in 1984, when a movie called The Terminator came out, that same accent everyone had mocked became one of the most famous sounds in the world. "I'll be back" became words that everyone knew. Success in Hollywood brought new kinds of pain, though. Arnold would spend months away from home filming movies. He'd sleep in hotel rooms in strange cities, surrounded by people who knew his character, but not him. Fame made every mistake louder and every stumble more public. He wasn't just Arnold anymore. He was Arnold Schwarzenegger, the brand, the legend, the guy who wasn't allowed to be human. Then he did something even crazier. He left movies to become a politician. Arnold became the governor of California, one of the most powerful jobs in America. Can you imagine going from lifting weights in a basement in Austria to running one of the biggest states in the country? It sounds like a fairy tale, but it came with a price that was higher than Arnold had ever paid before. By this time, Arnold had everything anyone could want. Fame, money, power, a beautiful family. From the outside, his life looked perfect. But perfection, Arnold was learning, is just another kind of prison. And the walls of that prison were about to come crashing down in ways that would change everything. In 1997, when Arnold was 50 years old, something happened that reminded him he wasn't actually the Terminator. He wasn't made of metal. He was made of flesh and blood and a heart that could break. And his heart was literally breaking. Arnold had been born with a heart problem that he kept secret his whole life. Now doctors told him they needed to cut open his chest and replace part of his heart with an artificial valve. Lying in that hospital bed, with bright lights above him and the smell of medicine in the air, Arnold wasn't the movie star or the champion or the powerful politician. He was just a scared man who realized that all the strength in the world couldn't fix everything. The surgery went well, but it left him with something he had never had before. A scar on his chest that reminded him every day that he was human. But the scar on his chest wasn't the deepest cut Arnold would face. In 1999, his mother died while he was far away making a movie. He didn't get to say goodbye. He didn't get to tell her how much she meant to him or thank her for believing in his dreams when no one else did. That regret would follow him like a shadow for the rest of his life. The heart surgeries weren't over either. In 2018, what should have been a simple procedure went wrong, and Arnold found himself in emergency surgery again. When he woke up, the doctors told him they had made a mistake during the operation. For a man who had built his entire life on control and precision, waking up helpless and confused was like living in a nightmare. He couldn't speak because there was a tube down his throat. He couldn't move because he was tied down to keep him safe. His mind raced with scary thoughts. Would his children remember him as strong, or would they remember this moment when he was weak? What would the newspapers write? Would he end up like his mother, gone before he could say the things that mattered? Arnold had more heart surgeries in 2020 and again in 2024. Each time, the recovery got harder. Each time, He was reminded that even the strongest body has limits. By 2024, the scar tissue from all those operations was making his heart beat irregularly. The solution was to put a pacemaker in his chest, a small machine that would tell his heart when to beat. For most people, a pacemaker is a lifeline. For Arnold, it felt like admitting defeat. The man who had once been called Machine now needed machine inside him to stay alive. He looked at his doctor and said something that breaks your heart when you think about it. I used to be the machine. Now I need one inside me. But Arnold's physical struggles weren't the only battles he was fighting. Sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from your own body. Sometimes it comes from watching someone you love disappear right in front of your eyes. Arnold's father-in-law, Sergeant Shriver, was an amazing man who had helped start the Peace Corps and married into the Kennedy family. He was like a second father to Arnold, teaching him about politics and public service. In the early 2000s, Sergeant started forgetting things. Little things at first, where he put his keys, a story he had already told, a name that wouldn't come to mind. Arnold had seen this before with a relative in Austria, and his chest tightened because he knew what was coming. Alzheimer's disease was slowly stealing the mind of a man he loved. As the years went by, Sergeant faded more and more. The man who had once spoken to presidents and inspired millions became a confused shadow in his own life. Then came the day that carved a permanent scar in Arnold's memory. Arnold went to visit Sergeant on a quiet afternoon. He leaned in to say hello, expecting recognition, maybe a smile. Instead, Sergeant looked at him with empty eyes and asked, "Who are you?" Those 3 words hit Arnold harder than any physical blow ever could. His father-in-law, the man who had taught him how to tie a tie properly and speak with dignity, was gone. Not dead, but gone. And there's no pain sharper than mourning someone who is still breathing. Arnold would later admit that watching Sergeant fade away was worse than all his heart surgeries combined, because it forced him to face a terrible question. What if someday I forget who I am too? What if all these memories, all these achievements, all these people I love just disappear from my mind like they never existed at all? That fear changed Arnold in ways that no one could see. He started exercising his brain like he had always exercised his body. He changed his diet, took supplements, did mental puzzles, not to live longer, but to remember longer. Because for Arnold, the idea of disappearing while still breathing was more terrifying than death itself. But even as Arnold was dealing with heart surgeries and watching his father-in-law fade away, a storm was building that would be entirely his own fault. In 2011, a secret that Arnold had kept for over a decade finally came out. A secret that would destroy his marriage, hurt his children, and teach him that some mistakes can never be undone. Arnold had fathered a child with Mildred, the woman who worked as their family's housekeeper for over 20 years. In 1997, Mildred gave birth to a boy named Joseph, Arnold's son. At almost the same time, Arnold's wife Maria gave birth to their youngest son, Christopher. 2 boys, born weeks apart, growing up in the same house. One openly acknowledged as Arnold's son, the other hidden in plain sight. For 14 years, that secret lived in their home like a poison that spread slowly through everything. As Joseph grew up, he started looking more and more like Arnold. Same broad shoulders, same posture, same spark as eyes. Maria noticed the similarities, but love and trust made her ignore what her heart was afraid to believe. When the truth finally came out in 2011, it destroyed everything. Maria confronted Arnold, and he confessed immediately. There were no elaborate lies, no desperate excuses. Just the raw admission of betrayal that could never be taken back. For Maria, this wasn't just about cheating. This was about 14 years of living a lie. It was public humiliation on a scale that few people ever face. It was a realization that the life she had defended and supported wasn't what she thought it was. Quietly, she moved out of their home. Within days, the whole world knew the story. The headlines were brutal. Complete strangers felt like they had the right to judge Arnold's private life. But underneath all the noise was the real devastation. For children Catherine, Christina, Patrick, and Christopher, suddenly learning that their family wasn't what they thought it was. And a teenage boy, Joseph, suddenly pulled from the shadows into a storm of judgment he never asked for. Arnold tried to do what little he could. He acknowledged Joseph publicly and tried to build a relationship with him. But the years of secrecy had already left scars that might never fully heal. When Maria made a rare public statement, her grace amazed everyone. She said, "This is painful and heartbreaking, but it is also part of life." Those words showed the dignity of a woman deeply wounded but refusing to let bitterness win. For Arnold, the shame was suffocating. This wasn't just a scandal in his mind. This was the moment he stopped being the man his wife could depend on, the man his children could completely trust. He had built his life on discipline and control, but this mistake stripped all of that away and showed the world that even he could destroy the things he treasured most. The pain cut deeper than any physical injury. It shook the foundation of who Arnold believed he was. Years later, he would say with complete honesty, "There's no one else to blame. I caused this pain. I hurt the person I loved most, and I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life." But here's what makes Arnold's story so powerful. He didn't try to make excuses or blame other people. He didn't go on talk shows to explain himself or make the story sound better than it was. Arnold chose silence, not to hide, but to take responsibility. He stepped away from the spotlight and began the hard work of trying to become a better man. He never abandoned Joseph, the son whose existence had brought the truth into the light. Instead, Arnold began building a relationship with him. Brick by brick, they found common ground in working out together and in the shared language of effort and discipline. Arnold also stayed committed to his 4 other children. He didn't push for quick forgiveness or try to fix everything with grand gestures. Instead, he just showed up: birthdays, graduations, simple family dinners. Each moment was a quiet promise that he was going to be there, no matter how long it took to rebuild their trust. Arnold never remarried after his divorce from Maria was finalized. Some people said it was out of loyalty to the past. Others thought it was his way of punishing himself. Maybe it was just his recognition that he had once held something extraordinary and had let it slip away. There was no dramatic Hollywood ending to this chapter of Arnold's life. Just a man in his 70s continuing to show up for his children, learning that redemption isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet and consistent, and sometimes takes a lifetime. Now, at 78, Arnold Schwarzenegger is not the indestructible hero crashing through explosions on movie screens. He's not the perfect body champion posing under bright lights. He's something more human and, in many ways, more inspiring. He's a man who has learned that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how many times you can get back up. Most mornings still begin before sunrise in Arnold's beautiful home in Los Angeles. It's a gorgeous place worth millions of dollars, with views of the Pacific Ocean and room for his whole family to visit. In his garage, he keeps reminders of his incredible journey. There's an actual army tank from his time serving in the Austrian military. There's the Hummer that he made famous in movies. There are sports cars and motorcycles, and even a private jet for when he needs to travel far from home. But the most important machine Arnold tends every morning is the one in his chest. His pacemaker keeps his heart beating steadily, though each beat carries a memory of all those surgeries, all those scares, all those moments when he wasn't sure if he would see another sunrise. The man who once measured his worth and how much weight he could lift now measures success differently. His workouts are careful and precise, designed not to punish his body but to keep it healthy. The protein shakes have been replaced with plant-based meals that are good for his heart. He meditates every day, something the young Arnold probably would have laughed at. Arnold's been in a steady relationship with Heather, a physical therapist who understands his health challenges. Their life together is quiet and private, without red carpet events or constant media attention. His children are all grown up now and living their own lives. Catherine brings her young children to visit, giving Arnold a chance to be a gentler kind of grandfather than he was a father. Patrick is acting and starting businesses. Christina lives away from the spotlight. Christopher is steady and grounded. And Joseph, once the hidden son, is now fully part of the family circle. The bond between Arnold and all his children has been forged through honest conversations, shared workouts, and the mutual decision to build forward without trying to rewrite the past. It's taken years, but trust can be rebuilt when someone is willing to do the work consistently and without fanfare. Forbes magazine estimates that Arnold's worth about $1.2 billion now. That money comes from decades of smart business decisions, real estate investments, and ventures that started way back when he was still competing in bodybuilding. He doesn't need to work anymore, but he chooses his projects carefully now, picking roles and causes that mean something to him rather than just making money. Arnold pours his time and resources into public fitness parks, after-school programs for kids who need help, support for military veterans, environmental protection, and Alzheimer's research in honor of Sergeant Shriver. These aren't publicity stunts. These are the quiet ways that Arnold tries to make the world a little better before he leaves it. Age has carved lines into his face and slowed his walk, but his handshake is still firm and his eyes still have that same spark that once drove a young Austrian boy to dream bigger than his village could contain. He's learned that strength isn't about how hard you can punch. It's about how steadily you can stand when life keeps testing you. Arnold shows up at his grandchildren's games, at family dinners, at quiet moments that no cameras capture. If his mansion is his fortress and his cars are his toys, then the lesson of his late 70s is this: redemption doesn't make headlines. Legacy isn't about being famous, and every quiet step forward matters, especially when a pacemaker in your chest reminds you exactly why you take each step. In the end, Arnold Schwarzenegger's story isn't just about muscles or movies or political power. It's about a boy from a tiny Austrian village who looked past the mountains and imagined a life bigger than anyone thought possible. It's about the long journey from cold basement workouts and broken English to sunny Los Angeles mornings where his grandchildren's laughter fills the kitchen. It's about the hard-earned wisdom that comes from victories and defeats, from scars both visible and hidden, that the strongest muscle anyone can build is the one that keeps showing up when showing up is hard. We celebrate Arnold not because he never fell down, but because he chose to keep getting back up. He traded the roar of crowds for the steady sound of a bicycle wheel spinning at dawn. He exchanged the crash of iron plates for the gentle weight of a child's hand in his. Arnold is living proof that reinvention isn't giving up, it's survival. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is admit they need to change. Now, approaching 80, with a heart that's been opened and repaired more than once, Arnold reminds us that life's real victories aren't the ones that make headlines. They're found in moments no one applauds, in forgiveness given and received, in discipline maintained when no one is watching, in the choice to keep moving forward when staying still would be easier. Arnold Schwarzenegger at 78 is not the end of a legend. He's the beginning of understanding what it really means to be strong. His story shows us that we're not born as legends, but like Arnold, we can build ourselves into something meaningful, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one act of courage at a time. If Arnold's journey has touched your heart the way it's touched mine, then do me a favor. Hit that like button to show respect for this extraordinary man who's taught us all what real strength looks like. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change, never too late to rebuild, never too late to become the person you're meant to be. And don't forget to subscribe because there are so many more incredible stories of human courage and transformation that we need to tell together. Arnold's story isn't over yet, and neither is yours.